evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 15th episode of Tex Messages. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. Glad to have you here once again this afternoon. Sorry about that. Forgot to open up the shades over there, so the lighting may have been a little less than desirable, but now it appears that everything is back up to specification, so we got the proper lighting and everything, and we should be ready to rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. So, unfortunately, today's episode will be cut short by a couple minutes once again, as the 14th episode was. One of the reasons for that is because the SD card, I was going to buy another SD card because I recorded a prior episode that I needed to keep on the on the SD card that I've been using consistently. However, that's a 32 gigabyte, and I probably recorded about 17 or 18 gigabytes worth. So about 16 gigabytes is an hour. So I only got about 57 minutes remaining on this one. And here's where the problem came. Because I was going to buy a new SD card, so I went ahead and I just went to Menards, picked up whatever card they had there. There's no, it said high speed on it, ideal for taking pictures. So you figure, okay, yeah, this should work. However, SD cards are a little more complex than they were even a couple of years ago. Nowadays, they got a lot of speed ratings on them. They'll say 80 megabits per second, 90 megabits per second, 100 megabits per second. The SD card presently on this camera, on the insanely expensive camera, ladies and gentlemen, is 80 megabits per second. And the one at Menards, unfortunately, didn't have a rating on it. So as soon as I plugged into the camera this morning, it just said invalid HD card or SD card, secure digital is what that means. So sadly, I'll have to cut short this episode, ladies and gentlemen. But it is a good lesson. So when you're looking for SD cards, if you plan to record in high resolution, just make sure you're getting 80, 90, 100 megabit per second SD card. And maybe by the time you actually buy a card, though, the technology will be far advanced from that even. So I mean, it isn't. Just digital storage in general has gotten pretty impressive. I mean, 128 gigabytes you can fit on something smaller than your pinky fingers. So yeah, that definitely helps with informational storage too. Kind of makes you wonder how much is really going on behind the scenes as well. Because maybe this technology existed somewhere in DARPA back in the 70s, but it just never becomes mainstream until 2015 or 18 or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I'm definitely excited about the future of technology and where that's going to take us and bring us and everything too. And sometimes on the news you'll read reports about Facebook is destroying people's lives because they're getting shots of dopamine and it's basically an addiction and all that. And like everything, may have talked about this before, but just keep things in balance. And sometimes, hey, you might have to abstain from something altogether. Like for example, if I was smart enough to go to college, I probably would have just completely abstained from social networking in general, and maybe just socializing, period, based on the magnitude of studies and research and concentration that would be required for that. Now, maybe if I wanted to put in a quality program here at Text Messages too, if I wanted to read a bunch of important stuff or news articles and research articles and be able to illustrate that, narrate that to you, the ladies and gentlemen, home at a high level, then yeah, maybe I would have to abstain from social activities and other hobbies and things of that nature. But unfortunately, I'm just trying to keep everything balanced. Work, family, friends, health, hobby. So, this show is obviously, I mean, it's not work because obviously you don't get compensated for it in any way, shape, or form. So it's definitely a hobby. Little bit health too. I guess you could throw in family and friends. I mean, those are. I probably shouldn't assume that anybody's watching it, but yeah, ultimately it's health and hobby. It gives you something to do over the course of the evening time, ladies and gentlemen. So that being said, though, for today's episode, I wanted to the central topic, the central theme will be buying and to an extent selling automobiles. What that means is vehicles that have titles to them, like a car, truck, van, SUV, something that's used on public roads. Something that you need a state-issued driver's license to operate. And yeah, when you sell a vehicle, you got to go through a little process. You got that green sheet of paper. You'll fill out one part, and then send that into the DMV or your local county or state, and then the seller will, or the buyer, or sell. As the seller, you'll fill out one form, turn it into the DMV. As the buyer, you'll fill out another form and bring that to the DMV and sign the however much it costs to transfer the title. So it's important to do that. If you're buying a car without a title, unfortunately, you sort of have to assume that it's stolen. That's sort of the underlying assumption. Now, if it's some old car from the 60s or whatever the case may be, and the title is legitimately lost and you got a bill of sale, and yeah, you can transfer it that way, but it is a bit of a hassle. I mean, you might have to get a judge involved or someone in law involved, and then it just becomes a big mess because you're probably paying hundreds of dollars to get some goofy title to a car that probably is only worth a couple $100. So there's that to consider. Then another thing too to consider, if you come across a car with a salvage title or prior salvage, basically the value is going to be completely in the crapper. So unless you test drive the car thoroughly and bring it to a big shop mechanic and he or she can tell you you're not going to have any problems with it, you probably want to just avoid that in general. If you get a prior salvage and then 2-3 years you want to sell it, you're not going to get squat for it. So you might think you're getting a good deal. Say for example you're buying a car that's normally worth 12 grand and you're paying 7 grand because it's a prior salvage. Well, when you go to sell it again in a couple of years, if you sell it again, I mean, if you're going to use it for 10, 15, 20 years, then by all means, and mechanic checks it out and everything and it looks good, you thoroughly test drive it, then by all means, it's probably the way to go. Not the way to go, but if the opportunity is right, if the car is right, if it's what you're looking for, then yeah, maybe it is a good idea. There is warranty considerations too. I mean, I've never bought a car with a warranty, but if you get a prior salvage, you're basically guaranteed to have 0 warranties whatsoever. And sometimes when you do get a car, like for example, my parents had this car it was a pretty old car, and something really messed up was happening with it, so we brought it into the dealership and they said, yeah, it's under warranty because there's a recall for this, that, and the other thing. So I mean, if it was a prior salvage, you probably wouldn't have been able to get that warranty fixed for it too. So I mean, a prior salvage, you're definitely on your own as far as that goes. Now, if you're good with fixing cars and everything too, no big deal. If you got your own garage and your tools and you got a couple neighbor buddies that like to stand around and drink beer and talk nonsense all night, then yeah, by all means, it's probably the way to go too. So yeah, prior salvage, probably better off avoiding it. Now, there's another thing too. If you buy a car and people have a loan on it, now if it's an older vehicle, say for example 10 years old and they get a loan from some shady company, what's going to happen is you're going to buy the car, you're going to drive it home, whatever the case may be, and they're going to hopefully pay off the loan and then turn in the paperwork to transfer the loan. And if it's one of those shady loan companies, they'll take the absolute maximum amount of time they have to take, and then they'll send them the title. So it might take you a month before you can actually sign the title for that vehicle. So basically you drive the car home, probably illegally because you don't technically own it, because you don't have the title, because the loan company owns it. And then it'll probably sit in your garage for a month, so you're just waiting to transfer the title, and you're not even sure if you can transfer the title because it was through some shady loan company. So if you're going to buy a car from some person if it's a really cheap car, $2,000-3,000 and it's got a loan on it, bear that in mind. You basically get what you pay for. In life, you basically get what you pay for. I mean, if you want to go through the hassle of having a vehicle in your garage for a month that you can't use so that you can save an extra $500, then it's probably the way to go. But just try not to think of it as you're saving an extra $500 and you're getting the same thing that you'd be getting if the vehicle had if the title was on the up and up and it was clean and clear and everything too. So there's that to consider. Just getting rid of all this, getting all this legal title mumbo jumbo out of the way is very important too. So I mean, if you're gonna buy a car from somebody, they got a clean title in hand with their name on it, that's probably the way to go too. I mean, if you buy I mean, there was one time I bought a car from somebody, and the title was in, apparently it was like the kid's friend's mom's name or something. So I mean, I couldn't technically take the car that day. You know, I had to come back the next day, and assuming he got his friend's mom to sign it, but in all reality, it was probably just a Ford signature. So I was like, all right, cool. So probably what happened is when the kid bought the car from his friend, he was supposed to transfer the title, but he was just too lazy to, or he didn't understand the legal title transfer process. You know, he's a younger guy, so some of that stuff isn't very forthcoming to people. It's one of those things where it's not, we're not really born with knowledge of legal transfer of car titles, so you sort of have to learn it over time. So yeah, he got the friend's mom to sign it, so then I went into the DMV, and they didn't seem to mind. They were fine with transferring the title too. Yeah, fortunately there wasn't any hassles there. I mean, the next day, boom, the kid had the signature on it, and we were good to go. Now, whether it's forged or not, nobody knows. I mean, nobody probably cares either. And then there's another issue too, where if you buy a car from somebody and it's got multiple names on it, but only one person signs the title too, and it's like, you know, you gotta get, say if you buy a car from somebody, some guy, and it has his name and his wife's name, but they're divorced now, and then you gotta get both people's names on it, and so yeah, I mean, there's, you won't believe how many pitfalls are involved with just some simple, basic process. I mean, every vehicle I've owned has had one name on it, mine. When I sell it, I transfer it. But there's a lot of goofy people out there that do a lot of goofy stuff that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. None of the cars I've ever had have had loans. They've never had, well, there was one car with a prior salvage, which was clearly written on the title. But I mean, yeah, you know, if there's any chicanery, bamboozlement going on with a title, you're gonna pay for it either with lost time, patience, money, or just anger. And the reality is, see, if you're looking to buy a car, and you sort of, generally when you are looking to buy a car, you probably want it as soon as possible. Now, granted, you know, you may have had a car for 10 years and you're slowly looking to transition to something new, so yeah, maybe you can deal with some title nonsense in that event. But I mean, if you just, say if you only own a pickup and you just get a job that's 60 miles away, so you need a fuel efficient car, generally you probably want to get the car as soon as possible so that you can use it to drive to and from work, because if you drive the pickup to and from work, you probably spend an extra 10 bucks a day just in gas. So I mean, if you gotta dick around waiting for a title for a month, then it's going to cost you an extra, you know, 250 bucks. So those costs are important to consider as well. And then the other thing too, if you buy cars online, if you're dealing with shipping companies, unless it's an electric car that only has a range of about 60 miles, well, if you do work with a shipping company, the best thing to do is to work with a local company. The worst thing you can do, say you're located in Minnesota. Now, if you call a company from Mississippi to ship a car from you because the car is in Florida or whatever, you can't expect to get the car, you're probably not going to get scammed, but you give yourself a greater chance of getting scammed. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. The company can just hold your money, never reply to emails, and then eventually you get a notice that says the company's bankrupt, so you're owed 600 bucks. And there isn't a damn thing you can do about it. Because lawyers probably $1,000 a 10 minutes or so, and the most you can recover is probably whatever they sell all their crap for. So when you're shipping a car, always use a local company. You know, the company that you can actually physically go to, meet the owners, meet the people driving the truck and everything too. So if they pull any funny business, I mean, you know where to find them. That's really all there is to it. When you put a face, people, one thing I've noticed, especially instant messaging, if people can't put a face on you, they're generally filled with hate and vitriol, and they have no problem crapping on you or belittling you or demeaning you as much as possible. And that's the same with businesses too. Unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in. Now, you could say, yeah, maybe it is karma, maybe you've done bad things to people of the past too. I mean, that could be. Now it's not as bad nowadays because there's a lot more of a feedback system. I mean, if you buy stuff on eBay and you see that the guy or gal doesn't have a very good feedback rating, you know to avoid them. Or, 10, 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't a very reliable system there. So things have gotten more difficult for scammers. I mean, they still figure out ways to do it too. They just get more creative, and unfortunately, somebody who's willing to participate in evil, malicious actions is always ahead of the curve, because good, upstanding, morally sound people, they don't even think in terms of malevolent actions. So to call a criminal a genius is probably the biggest oxymoron that I've ever seen, because nobody who consents to criminal behavior is smart. Because essentially, they're working with a stacked deck. So how could you consider that intelligent? I mean, anybody who wants to be a criminal can do it and be successful. That's how our world has worked. That's why the Almighty provided us with free will. That's why there's bad and good. If there was only good, there would be no free will. But getting back to cars and shipping them and everything, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to ship, it is, one time I bought a car from Boston. It was like uptown Massachusetts or something. It was 40 minutes away from Boston. So, I tried to get some company from Jackson, Missouri, and then they jerked me around for a while, and eventually just, I got the bankruptcy notice. So I was basically scammed, $600. They knew exactly what they're doing from day one. But there was nothing I could do about it. They knew there's nothing I could do about it. Ironically, the name of the company was Insight Cargo Services, and now for the last 9 years I've owned an Insight vehicle, so a bit of irony there. But after that time passed, and I knew I was getting, I knew I had to grab my ankles and everything. So then I decided I'd just fly down to Boston, pick the car up, and drive it back too. Now, one way air ticket is back then, it was a few $100 or whatever, not very expensive. Probably, yeah, it's cheaper than shipping the car, but when you got to consider all the gas you're going to dump into the car to drive it back, because it was probably 1,200 miles. So if you're getting 25 miles to the gallon, it's what, probably 48 gallons worth. So yeah, there's a few more $100 there, depending. Maybe $100, $200 more. So yeah, maybe it would have actually been cheaper just to drive the car back, but. If you're buying a used car, or you don't really know the condition of the car, it's a bit hairy too, because when I went out there and I saw the car, it had about 4 different brand tires on it. The fuel was pretty empty. There was probably a check engine light. The headlight wasn't working. It was just the seller thought that the car was going to get shipped, so he didn't really care to make sure it was completely roadworthy. He just put some junk on the car and slapped it on the back or on the tail and called it good. So when I showed up to pick it up, it's like, well, what do? You got to drive it back. So the first gas station I went to, I think the fuel tank was probably 12, 14 gallons, and I put in literally about, it's either like 11.9 or 13.9, depending on whether it's 12 or 14 gallon tank. It's a 2000 Kia Cephia, so you can look up the fuel tank capacity. So yeah, once we got some gas in there and we started driving, couldn't really go over 70 miles per hour because, the tires were all different, and they probably were out of balance and all that stuff too. So it was an interesting ride home. It was a long ride home. And it's one of those things too where if the car breaks down, what do? You get it towed 600 miles. So unless you're sure that it's a very dependable car, if you got some National AAA or some junk like that, then yeah, just make a fun experience out of it too. So yeah, we went to Cooperstown, the Baseball Hall of Fame. Saw some place in Wisconsin too. So it wasn't just completely bare knuckle driving either. It was pretty fun. It was a warm time of the year too. That's also very important. If you go to pick up a car in the middle of winter time, 600, 1,000 miles away, you are somewhat asking for trouble, more trouble than you normally would. So yeah, spring, summer, fall, it's just easier for everything. But it is important to go through the winter too, to be a winter soldier. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to our first break. Yeah, Good Times Balls Deep, the host of the show, he was meeting with an AV expert at St. Cloud State, or at Institute of Higher Learning. So hopefully that guy will have, or gal will have all the equipment to run the show at 12 cylinders, and so that it'll meet the stringent requirements of that the host of Good Times Balls Deep requires to run a good show. I mean, all the research he puts into it, even if you were to extrapolate the quality of the AV equipment to the quality of research and time that he invests in concentrating and studying his topics that he likes to discuss, it's probably, I don't even know if there's any AV equipment that would meet those standards, but we're just gonna get as close as we possibly can, and then just run with it with that, ladies and gentlemen. So that being said, you're listening to Tex Messages, episode 15 on the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Welcome back to Tex Messages, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. Glad to have you here. We're on episode 15. Now, you're probably wondering, if you're watching the show sometime between now and April 13, 2018, which happens to fall on a Friday, where is episode 13? Well, here's the thing with episode 13. We're deciding that we're going to film that on Friday the 13th and air it, upload it at 9 p.m. for you ladies and gentlemen at home. It's going to be a little different than the typical format that we've been running the normal, all other 14 episodes of Text Messages with, so hopefully you enjoy it. I mean, it's only good if you enjoy it. I'll probably sacrifice a few nights of watching Star Trek to make sure the show will be okay or worth watching. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to tune in for that and enjoy it and have a good time. Now, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking today about buying and selling cars. Mostly just buying cars. The first segment, be careful about the title. Just make sure it's a clean title. It's in the person's name selling it to you. And if you buy a car online, if you buy a car Auto Trader, eBay, whatever, try to lure the local shipping company. And if you want to make an exciting experience out of it, yeah, you can go ahead and fly out there and drive it back. So long, if it's an electric car with a 60-mile range, yeah, it's not very practical, but yeah, just worry with a local shipping company. That's probably the best thing I can tell you. And pretty much anywhere, probably in every state in America, United States, there's going to be a shipping company within the state. So just work with the closest company. Yeah, they might be a little more expensive than Big Joe Rosso over in Florida or whatever, but then you run the chance of not getting the car or losing time or getting scammed and things like that too. Because if people don't know you face to face, I don't want to say there's a high probability that they'll scam you, but there's a higher probability that you will get scammed. And sometimes too, it's just hard. They might not even intentionally scam you. It might be completely accidental. I mean, see, if you're not personally affiliated with somebody, you can things can fall through the cracks, and they might lose an order or entirely forget about something too. So it's not like people that do bad things are completely malicious in their intentions. Sometimes it's neglectful or just poor behavior or bad organizational skills or whatever the case may be. So always keep that in mind too. I mean, it's not you versus the world. It's just be smart about things. Learn from mostly my mistakes. Learn from. I've probably seen about every descriptor of titles that I mentioned in the first segment is stuff that I personally went through. So there's probably lots more potential fallacies that you can be hit with when you buy a car. And there was a while back, I bought this used car, and it had the only time I bought a prior salvaged car. I bought a prior salvage. And, the guy was going to put in airbags and everything too. So what he did, instead of replacing, because when the airbag on the passenger side blows up, there's a big crack in it. And it looks horrible, it's terrible and everything. So when he replaced the airbags, he just bought the actual airbag, stuck it in there, and reused the upholstery that had the big crack in it. So not only was it a prior salvage and was the resale value was trashed, but just having that there visible also, basically tanked the resale value. So, I thought I was getting an outstanding deal on a car, but now in reality, I was just getting an outstanding deal on being able to grab my ankles, more or less. So, when you deal with prior salvages, there's just so much opportunity for chicanery, and that's why prior salvages exist in the first place, because say in the early 20th century, there wasn't any of that, so somebody could smash up a car and some ragtag mechanic could fix it and sell it for top dollar or whatever, and then 100 miles down the road the car would completely fall apart, and Jane would be totally out of luck or whatever the case may be. So yeah, nowadays we're with some laws are laws that corporations lobby for and write to screw over the American public. Yeah, those aren't very good laws, but there are some laws out there that are good. Prior salvage law or lemon law. Just things of that nature are pretty good, and it's usually difficult for people to take advantage of it too. But criminals are always ahead of righteous people as far as that stuff goes. So there's always going to be pitfalls, but the most we can do is just to study past history a little bit and make sure we don't fall under the same pitfalls. For example, never send money to a person in Nigeria that wants to buy your car. Now, that's not to say all people in Nigeria are bad. It just means that typically, back in the early 2000s, if you would sell a car online, you would always get an email from people in Nigeria, and they would say, send me I'll send you $15,000 and then you send $3,000 to the guy that'll ship the car for me. The whole gist of it was that they would send you a phony check. Between the time the check would be determined as phony, they'd hope that you would send the $3,000 to their shipper. So they would get $3,000, you would get nothing. Well, you would lose $3,000. So that's basically how that scam worked. And now there's probably a lot more sophisticated scams out there. So if you're dealing with anybody from out of state, even if you're dealing with people in person, you almost have to read the person more than the car. Because if the person is telling you that this works fine, that works fine, this works fine, this is how it's going to go and everything, you have to be able to trust them. But, I mean, if you're buying a car, that's probably the only time you're going to ever meet the person in your life. You always want to be a little bit skeptical of them too. And you're not a bad person for judging somebody negatively, but it's just there's a lot of scammers out there, and it's sort of that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I feel that I've grabbed my ankles quite often as far as buying and not so much selling cars goes. So it's important to at least illustrate to you some of the pitfalls. Now that being said, ladies and gentlemen, okay, so I think let's transition into more of the mechanical side of cars. When you actually, say, from a buyer's perspective, say you're going to actually go buy a car. Now, you have a few options. You can buy a brand new car. I mean, I've never bought a brand new car, so can't really speak to that. And plus, there's enough material to fill the rest of the buying used cars and everything too. Now, you can buy from a used car dealer. One of the reasons that could potentially be good is that they do the 150-point inspection, and they fix things that need to be fixed, and they might even provide you a warranty too. If they're very reputable and if they've been there for a long time and they provide you're not very adept at fixing a car, they might provide you with good service after the sale and everything too. So, if you're a very wealthy person, if you make a good amount of money, then yeah, just buy a new car and get the warranty and all that stuff too. And if you don't like fixing cars, if you don't like wasting time fixing cars, or if you live in some weird coffin apartment where you got like zero space to fix your car too and don't have a garage or nothing, then that's probably the way to go. You can even consider leasing it too. Leasing is a little bit scary because it's transitioning people from a ownership to a rental society. And when America basically succeeded on being an ownership society because people could claim things as their own and just have more pride into it and put more time and effort into it. And there's been studies that have proven that too. When people buy IKEA furniture, they value it a lot more than they do other furniture because they spent their an hour assembling it or putting it together, so they felt that they put some of their blood and sweat into it. So if you own your vehicle and you put just even something simple as cleaning it, you take pride in having a clean car. But if you lease a car and it never really feels like it's truly your own, then it's just, yeah, you'll still clean it because you don't want to sit in garbage all day, but you won't get that sense of pride or sense of accomplishment or just feeling of well-being just to own and drive around the car and see like, yeah, this is my car. Like when they say car reflects self or something like that. I mean, that's it's probably mostly true. And so, from a philosophical standpoint, I would kind of recommend against leasing it, but I understand it does work. Everyone's got unique circumstances in their life. So just doing a deep dive into how the human brain operates and, the American philosophy, life, liberty, and the pursuit of things, leasing does seem like it deviates from that slightly. And on a personal level, it is going from the ownership to the leasing society is a bit frightening. Now, how that works too is, say, something like buying a house, for example. Nobody really owns their land. For example, the land that I'm standing above right now, I am not the owner. I have rights to occupy this land. Nobody else has rights to occupy this land. If you go on Wright County, look up, my address, it'll say, Big Rick Tex. He has rights to occupy this land in Elk River, Minnesota. He doesn't say I own the land, just rights to occupy. And then there's a lot of other laws and ordinances that go into that too, but we'll get into that later. So when you So if you're getting a brand new car, I don't know if it's true anymore, but what I've noticed in the past is typically the Hondas generally have very good quality, but apparently it's fallen off the last couple of years. You know, like, I mean, I got a 95 Honda Civic. The thing runs brand new. I wouldn't hesitate to take it from San Francisco, California to Boston, Massachusetts. I'd do that in a heartbeat. Probably even get 50 miles to the gallon, and it'd look great doing it. It would sound great. It'd handle great. Burns a little bit of oil, but, you know, that's no problem. So yeah, I just leave an extra quart of oil in the trunk or something and take it from San Francisco to Boston and back up to Duluth, Minnesota, and down to Austin, Texas to hang out at the InfoWars studio and just have a great time doing that. Now, the other car I have is 2000 Honda Insight. That was the first hybrid car, and the battery pack kind of cracked. If you don't, when I bought the car, the engine was blown, so I had to slap in a new engine. And the guy that owned it before me, he had the car sit for 9 months or whatever, probably even longer than that, maybe like a year or two. You know, he claimed it's only 6 months or whatever, but you know, I don't think that was true. Now, when those battery packs were made, so when you let it sit for a while, the batteries would, you know, discharge, and then when you charge them back up, then they'd get out of balance, and then it would just wreck the whole battery pack. So basically, the first thing I had to do was can the battery pack. So essentially, it's just a Geo Metro with an aluminum body. But aside from that, the car has just been ultra reliable. And when you consider all the brand new testing and technology that they had to put into that car, it was an indicator to me that Honda's a very reliable company that's serious about their quality and that they want to have a good car on the road. And for about a year, I was working this one job in Minneapolis, and you know, I was driving a GM because the seat was more comfortable. But one day it got to 20 below outside, started the car, then it just made some weird noises and stopped. It was like, alright, great. You know, I own a GM for 1 year, and the thing's already leaving me stranded when it's 20 below outside. You know, the Hondas never did. See, the thing is, yeah, things do happen to a Honda occasionally, but doing a comparative analysis here, when the failure happened, you know, it's like an idler pulley on my GM, it just instantly catastrophically goes bad, and then I'm screwed, and I need to spend $200 to get the car towed, and then, you know, I need to wait around at work for a few hours too, and it's just really boring. But with the Honda, when the idler pulley starts to go bad, you know, the bearing makes a little bit of whining noise, so you're thinking, well, I could probably drive for a few hundred more miles and then go on rockauto.com and order a new idler pulley bearing. Then when it gets here, I can replace it and just continue driving the car. Yeah, if you got an extra car or truck or pickup or SUV or motorcycle, then that's probably a good idea to just drive that and play it safe. But for the most part, if you got Hondas, if you fill them up with oil and do basic maintenance here and there, fill them up with gas. I mean, yeah, they do run out of gas too, like any other normal car. I mean, it takes a... Sometimes I even forget what side the filler nozzle's on in my car because it goes 600-700 miles before I need to fill it up. And, yeah, I mean, they're just very reliable cars, very trustworthy, haven't yet left me stranded anywhere. I mean, I even... See, there's an AutoZone parking lot in St. Cloud. Now, I was... Back in the early 2000s when that AutoZone first was built, it was along Division right across from Red Lobster. So it was just an open parking lot. But then at some point they put some giant curb in the middle of it. It's probably about a 5-foot long curb. You know, it's got the standard height, 6-7 inches, whatever it is. So I bought some brake lines. I was kind of looking at the brake line, making sure it's working. So then all of a sudden, you know, the car starts acting like there's an earthquake going on. So you know, after I nailed the curve, ran it over and all that stuff too, I figured for sure something was busted. You know, a rim was broken, a shock was burst open, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, I drove it down onto the street. Car wasn't really making any noise. You know, I kind of looked back there, looked underneath the car, hopped, jumped, bounced the suspension around or anything, looked at the tires. Tires were aired up, suspension wasn't making any noise, car wasn't leaning. So I figured, all right, cool. So I just started driving and nothing, car just ran just fine. So I mean, I completely nailed any mortal car would have probably, you know, at the very least a tire would have went down. But I mean, the car was made with such quality and balance, and it was lightweight too. I mean, when you nail a curve with a 1,700-pound car, there's a lot less chance that something's going to break than if you nail a curb with a 3,500 pound car. So that's the thing too. When I hit a bump with my car, it doesn't really, yeah, you can feel it, but it's like the whole car feels it. Whereas if you had one of those big GM cars and you hit a bump, you don't really feel it, and it just feels like the tire is going to bust off because the shock is just isolated to that part of the car because there's so much weight on the car. And the vibrations and shocking or whatever don't go through the whole car. I mean, it's just, even something as simple as opening and closing the door. On this 95 Honda I got, it feels like they just, other than the oxidizing paint, it just feels like they drove it right off the assembly line. I mean, it's just been an outstanding car. I mean, you can't really get rid of it. It's like, yeah, if cars were living objects and they regenerated their cells like humans, I'd probably have it till I was deceased or succumbed to natural death or malevolent death or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm impartial to Hondas, and I'll probably, but unfortunately Honda doesn't really make a good electric car, and most of it looks like the future of transportation will probably shift towards electric, just because they're more efficient, they're quiet, they're just nice and smooth to operate. One of the problems though is that I don't know that they have tested their safety thoroughly. I mean, if you're sitting behind some big giant electric motor and it's emitting all these electrical EM pulses and everything too, could it cause cancer? I mean, who knows? I mean, everybody knows that cell phones and wireless and this new 5G is going to probably cause a bunch of cancers and people to get sick and everything, but unfortunately the research just doesn't, the research into the safety just doesn't follow the research into the quality and technology and its workability and functionality and reliability. So yeah, that's why I'd be a little bit worried about getting an electric car, but I mean, the cars I got now, yeah, they leak a little bit of oil and burn a little bit of oil here and there, so sometimes at a stoplight I'll smell oil, and then you kind of think, well, it'd probably be better to have an electric car under these circumstances, but ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to another break here. Good Times, Balls Deep, the host of the show, hopefully, I'll probably talk to him this weekend, maybe I'll be able to reveal his identity and get further updates on his AV endeavors and audio video equipment to see how close they are to hitting the ground running and running on 12 cylinders. And yeah, I'm just very excited about the prospect of Good Times, Balls Deep. Yeah, we've been promoting it a lot here, and it certainly deserves all the promotions it's going to get. And once it does finally hit the airways, I think you, the ladies and gentlemen at home, will understand why it did receive so much lauding and adulations even prior to even airing. But once it does, it's important to get you ramped up and just ready and prepared for it too. Because if you're an unsuspecting viewer and you just tune in to Good Times, Balls Deep, I mean, there's going to be so much winning with the show that you'll probably, it'd be, I hate to use caffeine analogies or drug analogies, but it basically be if you never drank coffee before in your life and you just drink 5 cups of coffee at once. That's how excited and pumped up you'll be for Good Times, Balls Deep. So just trying to mentally prepare you, the ladies and gentlemen at home, so when it does come and hit the airways, that you'll still be able to maintain a regular sleeping schedule. You can concentrate and focus on the rest of your life too, and because I mean that's important from a health perspective. It's also very important because there is such a thing as too much winning, and when you get to that point, it is important to pull back on the reins. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Tex Messages. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. I'll be back in 3 minutes. Thanks for listening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tex Messages. Like I said in the first segment, we got a SD card that, well, I recorded a previous show and the lighting on it was sort of weird. It's weird because when you viewed it on the camera, the lighting looked perfect. But when you transferred it to the computer, and it seemed a little bit more dark. But if you stand, if you look at the monitor from different angles, then it's sort of everything. Not everything, but it just changes a lot, and then there's a lot of adjustments you can make on the monitor too, brightness, contrast, and all that good fun stuff. So yeah, I'm just probably later today or tomorrow or whatever, I'll probably go to Walmart or something and get a new SD card, and of course it'll be maybe experiment with the 90 megabits or 100 megabit per second SD card, maybe a little higher quality, then we can sort of compare that transfer rate to the 80 megabit per second that we're currently filming with, that you're watching right now, ladies and gentlemen. So maybe for episode 16 we'll be utilizing the higher speed SD card, but we'll see about that. So stay tuned for that. And episode 13 will air next Friday the 13th, probably around 9 p.m. That's Central Time. So it'll be dark out and all that. Well, yeah, it'll probably all be dark out then. And, yeah, so we got about 10 minutes left of the show, ladies and gentlemen. So, now, to get back to buying and selling cars. So, if you're going to buy a car, if you buy from a used car dealer, yeah, if they're reliable, reputable, if they give you a decent warranty, if they've inspected the car and all that, yeah, it's safe to do that. Now, if you're very adept at fixing cars, usually, me personally, I prefer to buy from private parties. One of the reasons why is because a private party, they've owned the car for 5, 10, 15 years or whatever. They know all the quirks of it. If they're honest, good, morally upstanding, hardworking people, they'll tell you and be honest with you and say, yeah, sometimes this acts kind of funny or that acts kind of funny, and the suspension makes weird noises, and the people are just very knowledgeable of their cars. I mean, every car I've sold, I've owned it for at least a few years, so I've always been able to be very forthcoming with the buyers and just shoot them straight too as to, what it is, what's happened with the car, what I've done with it, what I've noticed, etc., etc. Now, when you buy from a used car dealer, they usually get the car from either trade-in or they get it from these auctions that only dealers are allowed to go to. So they do have a bit of unfair advantage as far as that goes, because if private people aren't allowed to go to the auctions, then obviously the prices can be lower for the dealers, and then they can mark the price up and then make a profit and everything too, which they have to do, otherwise they won't even be able to run the business in the first place. So private parties, most of the times people just are looking to get rid of their car. I mean, yeah, you occasionally get these car flippers or whatever, but there are a bunch of weird laws out there that say you can only buy and sell up to 5 cars every year. So if you do buy from somebody, going back to the first thing, if you buy from somebody and the title's in a different name, you can almost ensure yourself that some chicanery is going on. So when you buy from somebody, yeah, do the title stuff. Now, from a mechanical standpoint, when you look the car over, just basic things you can do. You can kind of bounce the suspension up and down, see if it makes any noise, see if there's any creaking. Check all the fluids underneath. See, not necessarily that they're topped off, but that they, you don't see metal shavings in them, or that they don't smell funny, or, well, I mean, obviously they're going to smell funny, but yeah, just metal shavings. Just let's make sure if they look brand new and they just changed the fluid, then that really doesn't tell you anything. I mean, it could mean they're trying to hide something, and it could mean that they're just very meticulous people that want to make sure that you're getting a good car, that you don't have to do any maintenance on it for a couple thousand miles if you do buy it. And yeah, just look at high and low. Get a flashlight, get underneath there, see if you see any cracks or sway bar links. Those things break a lot. They're right by the tire. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things that go wrong. Check the plastic underneath it, see if there's any evidence that the car was taken off-road or hit bumps or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, you can look at the back of the car if it looks like it fell off a curb or fell off a driveway. And then the inside of the car, yeah, you definitely want to look that over too. Make sure there's no signs of, well, I mean, most people probably got animals in their cars too, but check for anything like that, or smoke damage, and just basic things that aren't readily apparent to the naked eye. And then you go in the trunk too, see if they got the tire jack and all that. I think a lot of newer cars don't really have spare tires anymore, because there's so many cell phones and people can just get AAA to tow them, so there's not really a desire for that. Yeah, when you drive the car too, you check the alignment. Just make sure the engine runs good. Look out for any smells. If you smell burning oil or burning transmission fluid, anything burning, probably a bad thing. And go through all electronics too. Check all the fans, check the radio, check the defrost, check all the motors if there are any, fan mirror motors, the windows, make sure those all roll up and down, and that the horn works. And yeah, just check all electronics. I mean, it's a test drive. You only got one shot to make it right, so you don't want to buy a car and then find out that the rear windshield wiper doesn't work, or that the rear defrost is broken or something like that. So you definitely check all that. Make sure the car doesn't shake at any speeds. Try to drive it both, your 30 mile per hour roads and then your 70 mile per hour too. Then you can really, now sometimes roads aren't always level too, so it may feel like the car is pulling in one direction, but it's actually the road is, at an incline or a grade. So there's that to consider. But yeah, just make sure you drive that. Importantly, that you're comfortable with it too. I mean, if you're driving a car and the ceiling is too low or the seat isn't comfortable, and then maybe it's just not the car for you. On paper it looked good, but when you actually drove it, then it was crap or something like that. And yeah, I mean, if you feel bad about wasting the people's time, just be like, hey, here's $20. Sorry it didn't work out. But thanks for the test drive and for your time and to provide me with the opportunity to know whether this car was going to fit my needs or not. So yeah, I mean, there's no crime in doing that either. I mean, yeah, people obviously want to sell the car, they want to get rid of it. So if you're going to come out there and meet, if you go out there with absolutely no intention of all of buying the car, then I guess technically there's not a crime for that, but it is a bit of a devious action. So mechanically, you don't want the steering wheel to shake. You want it to point straight and the car to go straight and the car not to pull to one side or the other. The engine to run good. The transmission goes through all gears. That reverse works. That's another important thing too. Check out all electronics. Windshield wipers. That stuff is very important. And yeah, when you look underneath the hood, just see if there's any wires that have been cut or wires that look like they're or connections that are loose or connections that are missing. And now, pretty much any engine part you're going to look at, especially on a used car, is going to be pretty dirty, so that's really not any indicator of whether it's going to be reliable or not. So you don't really need to take that into very much consideration. Just, look for anything that looks out of ordinary. And nowadays, they got all these plastic covers that go on engines too, so that hides a lot of things. And you probably don't need to remove anything to do an inspection. Just look for basic stuff. Look for any leaking fluids too, front and back. And you can, if the fluid is red, it's transmission fluid. If it's a brownish color, then it's probably engine oil. If it looks like it's a liquid green or orange color, then it's radiator fluid. And then there's other types of fluid too, like blue fluid would be windshield wiper fluid, and then And then blinker fluid. You always need to always check the blinker fluid to make sure that's full. If somebody isn't maintaining the blinker fluid properly, you know they probably don't care about their car. So ladies and gentlemen, that is one of the most important things to check when you're buying a used car. And sort of get to know the person too. Make sure they're not up to no good and that they're good people and they're nice and all that too. And well, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that we're coming to the end of the show. Glad to have you here once again, Tex Messages, episode 15. Now, a lot of the topics that we've been covering up to this point, I maybe cover 60-70% of what really needs to be covered. So there'll probably come a time where some topics will get revisited. And first I'll go through all the ones that we haven't touched first, and then maybe start looking back and saying, okay, yeah, we didn't really do as much as I should have done on this, or some evolution of knowledge occurred that I can incorporate into the show. And we're also going to have good times, balls deep, coming up in the pretty near future. Yeah, the host of the show, he's got all of his research in order, and he's probably got a few months of shows. I don't know if he's writing the show or if he's just going to do the same improvisational tactics that we do here on Text Messages, but either way, it's going to be great. It's going to make St. Cloud great.